Today, a major shift. Instead of just talking about human rights abuses in China, the UK has done something about them, along with its allies.
The UK follows US sanctions like puppets, often leading to negative consequences. Why does the UK sanction China just because the US asks? Shouldn't they prioritize their citizens? Sanctions can backfire even on the initiator. Stick around until the conclusion to learn about the UK sanctions on China and other nations and China's potential retaliatory actions. In the global political and economic arena, recent actions by the UK have led to significant controversy, especially with China. The UK's alignment with the US in imposing sanctions on Chinese firms influenced by US policies raises questions about the impact of such sanctions on both the targeted nations and the sanctioning countries. Sanctions, while intended to pressure entities engaged in objectionable activities, can also harm the economies and diplomatic relations of the nations imposing them. The UK's decision to sanction Chinese companies is not just an isolated foreign policy move, but reflects the broader influence of the US on its allies. These sanctions are part of a strategy to target support for Russia's military efforts in Ukraine. They affect entities involved in activities enhancing Russia's military capabilities, including drone and missile component production. China and other countries like Belarus, Serbia, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, and Uzbekistan are also affected. China strongly opposes these sanctions, alleging violations of internal norms and laws, and warns of potential retaliation of its interests and harm further. Apart from targeting Chinese firms, the UK sanctions also extend to EU entities involved in Russian oil trade and a Belarusian defense organization aiding Russia's military. These actions are part of a broader strategy to economically and technologically isolate Russia due to its actions in Ukraine. Junior Foreign Minister Marie Trevan emphasizes the UK's intention to pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin and disrupt military supply chains. In coordination with a group of 77 and other allies, the UK aims to weaken Russia's defense systems and curb the illegal provision of crucial goods and technology for its war efforts. Over 1,600 individuals and 250 entities now face restrictions under the UK's extensive sanction regime. While this reflects efforts to address global crisis through economic and diplomatic pressure, the consequences are intricate, affecting international relations, trade, and the global economy. The UK's alignment with US foreign policy, particularly regarding sanctions, sparks debate and criticism. Critics argue that this alignment may not always align with the UK's best interests, emphasizing the need for a more independent foreign policy approach. China's strong response to UK sanctions highlights growing tensions among major global powers, with China prepared to retaliate. This underscores the fine balance nations must maintain in international relations, where actions for national security or global stability can lead to unintended consequences. The debate over the effectiveness and morality of sanctions as a foreign policy tool persists in international relations. Sanctions, intended for non-military pressure, can impact civilians and the global economy, requiring careful consideration of potential benefits and drawbacks before implementation. The UK sanctions on Chinese firms go beyond penalizing specific entities. They convey a broader message on the international stage. They reflect the UK's position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and commitment to upholding international norms. However, implementing sanctions, especially involving major global economies like China, poses challenges. This evolving situation emphasizes the need for careful diplomacy and a fresh perspective on the global geopolitical landscape. Decisions made will impact not only immediate interests, but also the broader international community. The UK sanctions on Chinese firms are just one part of the larger global political and economic puzzle. As the world watches, responses from China and other affected nations will be closely monitored. The effectiveness of sanctions as a foreign policy tool, the resilience of global alliances, and diplomatic conflict resolution capabilities will be tested. These tensions will shape not only UK-China relations, but also the broader international diplomatic and economic landscape. The UK sanctions on Chinese firms have far-reaching implications beyond the Russia-Ukraine conflict, delving into broader international relations and global governance. These sanctions reflect not only the UK's stance on the conflict, but also deeper geopolitical currents shaping world politics. Firstly, the role of the US in influencing its allies' foreign policies, notably the UK, is significant. The UK's alignment with the US in imposing sanctions raises questions about its foreign policy autonomy. Such alliances often lead smaller nations to act against their own interests. This context is essential in understanding the UK's actions, rooted in its long-standing alliance with the US and the dynamics of power and influence in such relationships. Secondly, the nature and effectiveness of sanctions as foreign policy tools are under scrutiny. Sanctions, meant for non-violent pressure, can have complex impacts affecting both the target nation and the global economy. Humanitarian consequences, such as hardships for the targeted population, must also be considered. The UK sanctions on Chinese firms prompt questions about balancing political objectives and mitigating unintended negative effects. Thirdly, China's response underscores shifting global power dynamics. As an emerging superpower, China's assertiveness reflects growing confidence and a willingness to protect its interests globally. This signals a multipolar world where traditional powers like the US and the UK must engage with other influential nations in shaping international norms and policies. China's response isn't solely about these measures, but also sets a precedent for future actions. The impact of these sanctions on the global economy and international trade is a significant consideration. In our interconnected world, actions by one nation can have widespread effects. Sanctions on Chinese firms can disrupt global supply chains, alter international trade patterns, and influence economic relations between nations. The UK's move extends beyond its bilateral relationship with China, impacting the broader global economic landscape. Additionally, the diplomatic fallout from such sanctions is critical. Sanctions can strain diplomatic ties, provoke retaliatory measures, and escalate tensions between nations. In international diplomacy, where relationships are key, sanctions can hinder dialogue. This situation also highlights challenges faced by multinational businesses in a complex international environment. Companies navigating geopolitical tensions must balance compliance with national laws and regulations against their global operations. The sanctions on Chinese firms underscore the need for businesses to be attuned to the political landscape and develop strategies to mitigate geopolitical risks. Looking ahead, the UK sanctions on Chinese firms and China's response will have lasting effects on international relations and global governance. These developments may prompt a reevaluation of sanctions as a policy tool and discussions on more effective dispute resolution methods. As the global order evolves with the rise of new powers and the resurgence of traditional ones, established norms and practices in international politics will be challenged. The UK's decision to sanction Chinese firms touches on various aspects of international relations, including the influence of major powers, sanctions effectiveness, shifting global power dynamics, economic considerations, diplomatic relations, and challenges for multinational businesses. As the situation unfolds, monitoring responses and broader implications for the international community will be crucial. Do you think the UK's alignment with US foreign policy regarding sanctions is beneficial or detrimental to its own national interests? Feel free to share your insights in the comments below. Join the Revel Discovery community by subscribing and stay updated on this critical shift in global economics. As we explore these significant developments, your perspective is invaluable. Keep engaged with us.